Hello. So in this tutorial we are going to explore the authentication, authorization and permissions in a REST API. So we are going to keep building on top of this project, the same as the previous two videos. And we are going to implement a token-based authentication and implementing a login view. And I'm going to show you how to protect your views and how to deal with the user model in the serializers and the view sets. So the first thing that we need to do is to set up on the settings of the project the base, the strategy that we are going to use to authenticate the user model here. So let's check the documentation, and here on API guide we have authentication, and here is the setting the authentication scheme. So we need to add this block here. So here this is enabling the basic authentication, the session authentication, and actually we are not going to use any of those. The basic one is when you always send the username and password on the header, and the session authentication works in a similar way that the regular Django login works, and it's based on a cookie, and you can use this to navigate on the REST Framework Web Explorer. But then we are not going to use that for now. And the strategy that we are going to use is this one, token authentication. So we need to add here the scheme, and then we need to install the auth token here. It's already installed together with the REST framework, but then we need to include on the installed apps. So basically this is a very simple implementation that already comes with the REST framework, and usually in production I tend to use other libraries, for example this one here, Django Rest Nox, but the overall structure is pretty much the same, and the way that you're going to handle the token and the authorization, is not going to change. But later on I can also show you how this library here looks like. But then let's keep going, and here we need to migrate the app to create this token model. So let's just run the migration. Okay. And now we are going to need to create a user model. So just going to create a user here using the command line. The password, I'm just going to put 123. 123. Okay. And here for this token implementation, the REST framework, they provide this obtain token, auth token. So we don't really need to implement a view from scratch. We can just import that on our URLs. So we can call it login. So I'm importing here from REST framework auth token views, obtain auth token, and I'm just going to give it a name. Token. Okay, so this actually is going to receive a post request. So So this is the view, and it's just going to return the token here on the response. So let's map this URL on Postman. I'm going to create here a collection, not a collection, a folder, call it Authentication. Move that on top. And here we add a new request, call it login. This is going to be a post request. And then here on the body, we need to send the username and password. So username and the password 123. Okay. So here we just got our token, and then this token, if you're developing a mobile application or a web application, you need to store that on a local storage, and so you can keep using that to authenticate the next request. And then this token, we are going to need to add that to the header of the request. So let's keep this that way for now, and let's change our first view to authenticate the user. So let's say here this transaction model view set. This is this view where we list all the transactions. So far this doesn't require any authentication. So, and here, let's check the documentation. It will be on the permissions. And we need this permission here is authenticated. Okay. And then inside your view, you're going to add these permission classes. Okay. So now the user needs to be authenticated to use these endpoints, both to list, retrieve, update, delete, and if you try to retrieve the data now, so you're going to see that it returned for us 401 unauthorized. And here on Postman, to send the token, which is this one that identifies our user, is here on authorization, and we use API key. So we need to add a header, name it authorization, and use the prefix token. Just paste the token here. Okay. And now, if we try again to send the request, it's authenticating the user here. And for example, we can do another test using just the console. Let's copy this URL here. So this I'm just making a GET request to this URL, and it's returning here the status code 401, and here you can see the strategy that is requesting to authenticate. So it needs a token, and here I have an example here. Just going to change the token, which is this one. So now it retrieves the data. So, and now we need to change the other endpoints here, because also to create, we are going to need to be authenticated. So we just change here the strategy and use API key. Okay. Also to retrieve. Okay. Update as well. And delete. Right. Okay, so now that we have the default user model implemented and we are authenticating the user, maybe we can transform this application in like a SaaS application where you have multiple users using the same application when they sign up and they create their account, and each user have their own set of categories and transactions, and they can use these as a service to log their transactions there. And we're also going to need to protect this view as well for only authenticated users. And this one is going to be like a view that anyone can consume because it's a read-only view, and this is a shared resource on the database, let's put that way. And here we need now to identify this transaction that this belongs to a certain user. So we are going to need to add a foreign key to the user model. Let's import this. So I'm importing this directly from Django. So Django contrib of models user. And if the user is deleted, I want to cascade all the transactions, because the user here is going to control the transaction. So if I'm deleting this user from the database, I just want to clean up the information, not leave anything behind. And because I'm introducing this field after we got some transactions on the database, I'm going to let it be new. Actually not. I'm just going to write a migration to hard code the only user that we have here on the database. So anyway, let's just set the related name. So the related name is like a shortcut that we can use to, from the user, retrieve a set of transactions related to this user. So that's why we use the name of the class in plural. So you're going to do something like that, user.transactions.all, to make like a reverse query set. But I will show you how this works. And the same thing for the category. We are going to need a user here. And here, let's create the migrations now. Oops, not transactions here, categories. All right, so because this model here is not null, we are going to need to set a default value. So I'm just going to hard code here 1, because 1 should be the ID of this user that we just created. We can check that. So yeah, so this is the user that I created on the command line. So the ID is 1. We're going to just hard code that. Now we can migrate. So now we just introduced this user field both to the transaction and to the category, and all those transactions belong to this user. And now something that is going to break our application is that we no longer can create the transactions like that. So we just got an error 500 here because user is a mandatory field. So we need to set this field here on the view. And for this case, there is basically two ways to solve the problem. The first one is I don't want to expose the user here, so I don't want the user, the person who is consuming this API, to manipulate the field, because I could just add the user here and then provide the user here on the endpoint. Okay, so this should work. But then this is not a good idea, because let's say we create another user here. Create. Let's put this Maria 123 and 123 as well. And then, so here I'm using the token from my account, but then I'm creating a transaction for someone else. So in some cases this may make sense, but in other cases may not. And here I'm trying to create an example where these shouldn't be allowed, but at the same time I need to provide this information to the endpoint. So here we can remove the user, and then on the view we can override the perform create here. And first let's see the implementation here. So this is the default implementation of the create model mixing, which is part of the model view set. So basically this is just a hook that passes the serializer here inside the create class, not class, sorry, the function. And I'm passing here the serializer to this method just to call the save. But the save accepts like some extra parameters that you can inject in the creation of the model. So here we could do something like that, serializer.save, and tell that the user is actually the self.request.user. So here I'm retrieving the user that is current logged in. So let's save this and try. So now I'm not providing any extra information here, just setting the information as is. And as you can see, it's creating here the data. And let's check here on the list. Maybe we remove this filter, and let's make an easy way to identify the transactions. Okay, 17. Actually, we just filter for BRL. Okay. Now, just so we can test it, let's change the read transaction serializer to display who is the user. So I'm going to create a serializer here for the user model. the wrong user. So this one. So here also importing just the user. And let's call this like read user serializer. So I just want to see the ID, the username, and maybe like first name and last name. And we make all the fields read only. And we put the user here. And now we are displaying the current user. And let's check this again. Okay. So now we have here the owner of the data. Okay. And then let's see. Yeah. And then this currently is leaking all the users data to this endpoint, because this belongs to another user, and currently I'm listing everything here. And just before we fix that, remember that on the last video I talked about this paying attention to the when you add foreign keys to the serializer, because now we added the user model, but we are not prefetching it here. So we need to remember to include this information here as well. So we can just see that by the how much time it took to resolve this endpoint. So if we try now, should be back to a faster request. Okay, so now we need to solve this issue here with the data leaking. And here, as you can see, we are just returning all the transactions on the database. So instead of setting here the query set, we can get this, what we have here, remove, and we can use this hook, which is the get query set. And here we are going to return, and we are going to filter the user as the self.request.user. Okay, so let's try again. So we can see by here this should be 333. Yeah. And now another task that we can do here is logging with the Maria account. So we have another token. And then here on the list, we can just switch here the token. So just one transaction here, which is the only one. So now we are starting to make this slice on the data, and we can allow several users to use the same application on the same database, but each user having their slice of data. And as you can see here, I'm just setting this token manually all the time that I change. But then there is a nice trick that we can do here on Postman using the tests, because I have this snippet here that usually just copy and paste. So you can pass the response data, and then you can set that we need to create an environment here. Let's call this local. Okay. And then we select this, and then you can use this utility here, environment set, and we call that access token. and we set the access token, the JSON data.token. So now if we make a request here, you're going to see that the access token is defined here. It updates the environment data. So now if I change here to the other account, it's going to change. So the final here is 575F. So now it's updated. So, and then on the authorization here, instead of hard coding the token, you can put the access token here. Okay. So now the effect is that you don't need to change the authorization anymore. And then, for example, I'm logged in as Vitor, and now if I change here to test my application, just log in and then try again, it's already there. So this is usually what I do here on Postman, and I usually, for example, build that in a way that I can also feed more information to other endpoints as well. So yeah, this helps with building like complex interactions between the APIs. Okay, so something else that I wanted to show you is that another way of doing that, this is very convenient. So you can pass like other information here that you base it on some logic that you can explore the data, make some queries, or making relationship between the information and providing here whatever information that you need. But then this is such a common use case that REST framework have a shortcut for that. So here on the right serializer, what it is, well, let's just move this here to the top of the file so we have it more organized. Just a sec. Okay. So here on the right serializer, we can add the user, but then the user can be like a hidden field, and the default is going to be serializers.current user default. And then I can remove this perform create here. Okay. Now let's use the Maria account because it's going to be easier to test. So now let's create a new transaction like 150. So it's our, oops. I'm using the wrong token here. Change to the access token. So I was using the hard-coded token, so it actually created for the wrong user. But anyway, let's try again. Okay, so now 2 transactions here, and 150 should be here. Yeah. And now if I try to change, to tamper with the payload here, actually trying to override, let's put like 999 so we can easily identify this one. It's just ignoring this data that I'm passing, and I'm always doing a fallback to the Maria account. So this is also safe, and you don't need extra customization on the view set. You can just put the logic here on the serializer. So, and then you don't need to pass the information here. And we are going to need the same thing for the category serializer, right? So each user have their set of both transactions and categories here. But what I did was just I just saw that we mixed the data because we need the same logic here for the category. So category here should be, and we should return only the categories that are related to the authenticated user. So, and now this is something else that we need to pay attention. For example, if we go back here, if we try to list the transactions, we need to authenticate, right? Using the API key. And this account doesn't have any category. But then if you look at here, I'm passing the category with the ID 2. So I'm actually using someone else's category to create my transaction. I'm not blocking here from doing that. So one thing that you need to do to avoid this kind of scenario where you use other users' data is also protecting all the related models here on the serializer. So a way to do that is here on the right transaction serializer is to override the category query set. The currency is okay because we are treating this one as like a global model that all the users can use that. But then for the category, I just want to use the users category here. So let's create one, and I'm going to call this one like home or technology, tech. Okay, so we can differentiate. So again, the authentication, just add the API key. Oops. Let's see what happened here. Oh, forgot to add the user here. So whenever you add the user as a hidden field, you just make sure you include on the fields. Okay, so this user here only have one category. And now on the right serializer, a way to do that is overriding the init method here. So the first thing, you just want to execute things as is. Okay, and now you're going to access the self.fields, and you're going to get the category field and access the query set. And why we are doing that here inside the init? That's because we need the user from the context, and we only have this information during a request and response cycle, because here we need to access the user from the self.context, and then the request is here .user. So here is where you retrieve the user that made the request that is using this serializer. And here on the query set, you can filter only the categories that are related to this user. So let's see what happens now if we try to create a new transaction for Maria using the category 2, which is a category that doesn't exist on her account. We only have the category 4. So the REST framework is going to handle that and has 400 response, which is a bad request. But then if we try to create a new transaction with 4, it should be created without a problem. And here you can use this query set like that, or if you remember, we created this related name here, so we can also change how we retrieve this data. We can also use user.categories.all. So this is more friendly, I guess, because just telling here, I just want the categories from this user here. And the effect is the same. And then if we try to change. Okay, I think that's all for now. And I'll see you on the next tutorial. Bye bye.